We've now got a panel session, Agree to Agree, enabling global research collaboration through identity federations. Off you go, guys. Off you go. Yes, confuse you.
We did our best. Hello, everyone. I'm Davide Vaghetti from GAR, and I'm also, and I work on trust and identity. I'm responsible for the Italian Identity Federation that is called IDEM. But here I'm also wear the hat of the Edugain service owner. And with my colleagues, Paul Axelsson from SUNET and Martin Kremes from SURF, we're going to talk about the role of identity federations and Edugain in international and global research collaboration. So, let me start with a brief of agenda, a short agenda on what we're going to talk about. So, first of all, we want to tackle what is the role of identity federations for research and education, what is in for users in research and education. Some of the identity federation key success factors, and what can we do to enable global access to resources for research and education. And then we will have a look on what is the current Edugain strategy and roadmap for the near future. We're going also to showcase, to show a few use cases built on top of Edugain. And finally, we have a call to action for identity federations. But let's start. So first of all, we had in the previous days already some definitions of an identity federation. Here is another one. Basically, when we think about an identity federation, we should think about a collection of organizations that agree to behave with the same set of rules. And these rules are about the legal framework, the policies, and technical profiles. These enable a layer of trust between the entities, the organizations in this federation, and also the needed security to exchange identities and access resources. And the third party that is providing this layer of trust is the federation operator, or if you want, the identity federation itself. It is the needed trusted third party that enable this exchange. So, but what's in for users of research and education? Let's try to look at two of the most common users in our field. So researchers and students. Well, for researchers, if they can access resources through their identity federations, this means that they have a seamless and secure way to log into, resources for research, being those journals, academic journals, or, for example, sync and share services. They also have a trust layer that can enhance collaboration among institutions. This is really important because if you don't have trust, then collaboration is really difficult. And it is difficult also to share resources. And this is even more important when we are talking about critical resources. So if you think about health data, if you think about HPC systems, these are not common resources. Usually you need, more trust in these cases. So trust is fundamental. For students, we have, of course, study resources, being those, learning management systems, facility for enrollment or admission. And then we have also support for student mobility that, of course, it's impossible because if you don't have something, at least in an easy way, it's impossible to implement student mobility in an easy way without a trust layer. you would need to exchange, to set up a number of bilateral agreements among all the institutions. And this is why, again, the trusted layer is so important. But what's in also for publishers? Well, for publishers, for example, identity federations are really a useful tool because they can set up just one solution to work with all the federated research and education institutions. And at the same time, this system is providing them a seamless way to update the services and the policies. For example, when they want to change the requested attributes, they just need to change the metadata, and it's the federation that is going to update the metadata for all the organizations that are part of the federation itself. And the publishers, but not just publishers, I mean all the services, can leverage a set of standards to agree on the value of attributes and how to release them. Finally, for research and education, tailored services. And here I'm talking about both commercial services and services that are designed, developed, and implemented by the research and education community itself. Well, in this case, again, the trusted framework is very important to connect research and education institutions, because without it, it is difficult for an organization to share sensible resources with other institutions. Also, we do provide inside federations enhanced assurance by implementing REFED standards. We have a framework for identity assurance in REFEDs. And we also have common standards, again, for security and privacy. And these are paramount for research and education services, where, again, you might have the need to give access to sensible resources. So this is a brief session about the role of identity federations for research and education. But now I would like you to answer a few questions, because we would like to run this session, this presentation, in an interactive way. So we're now going to give the whole presentation and then open to questions and then start asking for questions. But instead, we want to, ask some questions directly at the end of it, part of the session. So this is the Menti code and the QR code. If you have scanned this, you will also find the number and the scan here. So if you haven't done it yet, you still have time. So we have a few questions for you. The first one, what is your current involvement with the Identity Federation? So either you are operating a federation, planning to set up a federation, just exploring the concept, or you are just a user and you're interested in, services and what's going on in this space. So if you didn't have time, so the number of people in the room is higher than the number of answers. So I give you a few more seconds if you want to give your answer.
Please participate. I mean, that makes it more fun.
Yeah, of course it does.
I can always get a t-shirt from
Yeah, the faster to answer
Well, next time we have to do it in a
will be spared from taking another t-shirt.
The other one's mandatory.
If you're the last one, okay, I think it's enough. So we have, I'd say, a quite balanced audience here. But we have, at least one answer. Someone is still planning to set up a federation, and two are just exploring the concept. So if you would like to, ask any question right now, or for example, who is planning to set up the federation, would like to share some, ideas or challenges that they are facing right now, or any other questions that they might have in the journey to set up the federation, please go ahead.
We
If
really want to
not-
have questions all over the presentation, not at the end.
Yeah, please. Interrupt us. Basically, we are just pausing and give you time to share your thoughts if you have any.
Talk to us about the killer app that people keep wanting.
We will come there.
Okay, so thanks for the answers for now. If you have any questions about this part later, please feel free to share. I think now we can just go ahead with the presentation, then we crack the ice a little bit more. Yeah. Okay, so now
Yeah,
Paul
I'm
Axelsson.
trying to stand here. Continue. So one of the key things for success we have seen is that a National Research and Education Network is some way involved, maybe not as the operator or the owner or so, but they need to be involved to be able to help and put it out to their members and stuff like that. They are part of this trust chain. Whatever we say, they are a part. Because the universities and other institutions are using the NRN normally. So we think that's a very, very critical success factor to get the NRN on board. But they don't need to run it. It could be, as in AF case, a specific organization outside. It could be a university or group of universities runs it. That's not a problem at all. But it's good to have the support of the NRN. That's very important. To be able to get adoption, you need to find services. You talked about killer services. Of course, there are killer services. But you need to find the set of services, the set of use cases that get the institutions in, but also get services in, because it's a chicken and egg problem. Always a chicken and egg problem. If there is no identity providers, there will be no services. If there are no services, there will be no identity providers. So therefore, the very close services to the NRN and the community is the first one that drives up, because if you get those on board, you get the IDPs. So you really need to figure things like that out. You also need to have an agenda on how you do stuff. You need to build your communication strategy. And you need to do it, maybe start slow and get some in and things like that. And still talk about it with everyone. Make others talk about it and use it one way or another. The operations part, it comes from the beginning. If I remember what we three did from the beginning, we did this more or less on a little bit, very small part of our time, 0.1 FT or something like that in the beginning. But now, at least in my federation, we are 3 FTs or more, depending on how you count, to run the federation. And that's why you need funding one way or another. You really, really need funding. And you need to have sustainable funding. There is different ways of doing funding. One way is that I'm an NRN, and we are using the cost of connecting to the NRN to also be able to be a part of our federation. That's one way of doing it. That's the positive part of being an NRN. And another way is that you have member fees, one way or another. The third way is, of course, you get money from someone else, i.e. government, or big research infrastructure that needs to have things done. But funding is important. It's also very important to have a start funding and then have long-term funding. Because when you start to do this, it's a long-term thing. And we always talk about edugain. But what it's all about is let the users at the institutions connect to service all around the world. It's nothing else. edugain is the tool for that. The federation is the tool for that. Create international connections, be part of our greater community in ReFeds, be part of doing your part in edugain in the meetings and so on. Build your community, local, regional, and in all over the world. And it's very simple. That's why we three are here, because we want to build the community. We want to expand the community in a good way. Most of what we do is about standards, of course. All about standards. And you can look at this different sliders or the standard problem. So we need to have standards to be interoperable, to be able to connect to a service for 50 or 2,000 IDPs, or 6,000 IDPs that we have today. You need to be able to do it in a sustainable way internationally again, especially for all the publishers. They are going in through a couple of federations. I think it's 3 or 4 most publishers are. Yeah. And what we normally doesn't say, but identity federations is security. It really is security. It's just another way of security. The way you protect your services from unauthorized access. You know who's logging in. And for that we also need a standard. And we also need identity assurance for this. We need to know, a service owner may need to know that this person is verified to have this email address, the lowest level. Another service provider need to have, okay, all my users in my service, the home organization must have looked at the passport or the ID card and really checked that you are you, and maybe even go into the population registry to really check that it's you. So we have everything in between those. Especially in HPC systems is high, medical systems high, but collaboration forum, maybe it's enough with a mail, with an institution mail address, not a Google mail address, but institution mail address. But you don't want to use another login; you will use the same login. And then, of course, the biggest interesting discussion we always have: what type of data should a service get about the user? And who defines what the service get? This will be an interesting discussion in the future, but right now is the home organization that totally span what the service get. At last, until now we have been talking about federations and stuff like that, but we already talk about what it is about. It's users. It's always about getting the users into doing what they need to do for their research, for the studies, or whatever type of work they have at the institutions. Make them be able to work, make them be able to study. That is what federations is about. Nothing else. So try to find your use cases. Try to build the use cases. If you really want to get the federation working, you really need a use case. I can say that our biggest use case when we started, 2006, 2007, was a national admission system for students that all students needed to use, not only when they admitted to the university the first time, but for every semester. First time they used the mail address to do it, but then they starting using their student accounts. That was our first thing that makes everything tick. The second one was, of course, e-meetings. Organization-wise, yeah, you need to have your rule set, as David talked before, and you need to build that so the organizations can be there, but also that the organization can be trusted of other organizations. Because federations is all about trust of processes, trust of technology, trust of end users, to make the end user be able to use the services. And again, funding, funding, and funding. Not about funding the end users, but funding the infrastructure so the end users can be able to log in. Yeah, I think I've gone through everything.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Again, as this is an interactive session, the more that we can, at least. So probably, I mean, it's the same Menti, so if you had the browser, the page, you can still use that one. And I'm now switching to Menti. And we want to know a bit more about your identity federation, if you already are part of one. So what we want to know if your federation is part of the NRAN, is a standalone legal entity, or is part of a university or other research or education institution, or you're not yet in a federation, or something else, or you don't know. Yeah. So, quite interesting numbers here. If we do the same thing in Europe, we would get, probably the whole that would say they are part of the National Research and Education Network. But here we can see that it's a different scenario. And yeah, we have universities or other research or education institutions that are taking the lead. We have also some standalone legal entity, like for example, AAF, as Paul was saying. Okay, I think we are mostly done with the answers. It's interesting because again, as Paul was saying, even if the NRAN is not running the federation, the cooperation with the local NRAN is crucial, but not just with local NRAN. I mean, with the research and education environment, and of course the NRAN is part of this. We have 3 standalone legal entity, and I have a question about this. I know, for example, in the case of AEF, you're a not-for-profit organization, and you're funded by yourself. I mean, you're funded with the fees, right? Basically. So what about, I don't know if the other answers to the standalone legal entity, what is your business model, if you can share it? I mean, for example, you can be a standalone legal entity by being funded still by the government or by the fees as AEF or another source of income.
Well, Simula is a standalone legal entity, so how we live based on the subscription fee by the members, same like AEF.
AEF, okay.
We also are now funded by the government as well. So we have 2 streams.
Oh, you're also funded partially by the government. Oh.
For any uplift, like authorisation of the service we're building, that's being funded by the government.
Okay, okay. Good, good to know. Good that the government is taking care, by the way. Yeah, that's also good. Yeah.
Actually joined the Club of National Research Infrastructure things.
Yeah, absolutely.
4 years
Yeah.
to sort of work through that process.
But since the beginning, or?
Since about 4 years ago, we just
Okay.
started annoying the government enough that
They recognized how important you are for, yeah.
we also talked to all of the other research infrastructure folks saying, tell the government that we are important. So there was lots of messaging going to the government saying, the AAF is important, it's part of the whole picture, and we need to be funded in the same way as the infrastructure, the national infrastructure.
Okay.
Which is good. If I may comment on it, that's good. And I'm not sure if you have to use the microphone because I know not sure if people are online anyway. But okay, yeah. But I see somebody now anxiously giving the microphone. Now you were saying, like, I think that is also giving you an indication on two things. Once you build up that infrastructure, you have to of course find the money initial to fund it. But then you see also in your case it pays off that people say, oh, I do see value in having a central run federation on building the trust instead of each and every identity provider, so each university and each resource on its own and doing all bilateral trust, which is way more costly in the end for the whole system. And what you also see now is, and we see that in Europe also in a scattered way, that it is an infrastructure. It's not an infrastructure by means of having fibers in the ground or doing, but it is a software-built infrastructure where you have a trust infrastructure, and you have to fund it that way. I mean, like Paul said, he has 3 FTE. I think for Surf Connects we run, we have close to 1 million students in the Netherlands. We basically do the whole higher ed and research in the Netherlands. And you see also here, like, I think on average it's also like, well, it's spread over more people. There's also, I think, 3 to 4 FTE who on running the federation, and we also run a central hub. And you see here also that it pays off because the effort we put in, our institutions don't have to put into. So it's of course, but yeah, you have to find that gimmick, that the fact that the effort you put in, that is, well, on other places is where you get the spin-off.
So funding is quite important. I wonder, from an NRM perspective, also from the university's perspective, I know that in some countries the NRMs are funded directly by government. In other countries, NRMs are funded by member fees. In a third group, they are a combination of these, of course. So how is it in your case, these 3 that has NRMs funded running stuff, is this funded by fees or by government, more or less? That's my question. At the same level that we had on a freestanding entity. In our case, you can say directly, we are funded by semi-government. We are getting fees in from the university that are funded by government.
So in case of SURF, we are truly a member-run organization. So in our case, we have, I think, yeah, I've lost track, at least over 100 members. So basically each university and research organization and applied university is member of SURF, and they pay a fee, and there we do basically the operations from. The new stuff, that is mostly, I won't say totally, but at least for a part also paid by subsidies, so innovation money from the government. So we can do basically new stuff, really new stuff via government streams, whereas running and enhancing the current infrastructure is done via the membership fees of our members. So that we can do both and new stuff as well as doing operating, but also doing enhancements in the line of the existing stuff in the membership fees.
Daily operations.
Yeah, the daily operations, but also daily enhancements. I mean, yeah, exactly. I mean, it's not that basically for every feature request we have to use the funding from the other government, but but more the disruptive stuff is being done via the government streams.
So I might just talk about the New Zealand story. They started as a project out of one of their universities that then spawned off a small not-for-profit company. But they soon realised that having only 6 universities in New Zealand was not enough to sustainably fund that operation at not an enormous cost to the universities. Yeah. So they have now moved into being part of the NREN. And the NREN is now helping to fund the operations of their federation. And they now have 2 FTE running their federation. So they've gone through that process, and that's because they're a small country, and there was not enough money to go around for everybody. So
that also makes sense on starting alone and then merging into.
yep.
Yeah, someone else that would like to share their experience or your willingness, for example, to again change your current status as part of university. Do you see yourself in 5 years, for example, being funded?
Hello. I am Marlo from the Philippines, and I am with Colleen. We are actually interested in building an identity federation. Our use case is related to HPC. We would like for users to access our HPC resources. So we are here in order to explore the identity federation. What do you think are the challenges that we need to take note in order to successfully create this kind of federation, especially in HPC setup?
I always have the same answer on this question, because most people think this is technology part. The technology is the easy part. It's extremely easy. Not. But it is easy. The hard part is policy and governance. That is, if we look at it from my perspective in running a federation, I say that around 1 to 1.5 FTE is only governance and policy. The rest, half of it is about, another half FTE is doing community engagement. The last is about running the federation. So you see where we put all our stuff in. We're doing stuff in the governance and policy part, because that is where the trust is.
And if I can add, this is also what is paying you back more. I mean, putting effort in the policies, building the community, working with the community in terms of less support that you need to give them. Because, for example, the more standards you can apply and implement with the community engagement, the less support you need to give them to accomplish what they need to do. So it's really about building the community and grow with them. Unfortunately, it is a chicken and egg problem. So you need to, the initial effort is, you can do this incrementally, but the initial effort is not paying back soon. The paying back usually is coming with some time. And when we are talking about the killer application, we are talking about something that usually has something like either a very high impact. HPC has a high impact, so it's a very good use case, or a large audience, and just like student admissions, for example, which is both. Sorry?
Zoom through COVID.
Yeah, Zoom through COVID, absolutely. VC in general.
Yeah.
So,
and just to add, I mean, when we started Surf Connect 15 years ago, or Surf Federation back then, 2007, you also saw we still had to do a lot of adoption work at the universities, because they were not used to identity management systems, and service providers were not used on, of course, we have to do authentication external now. So basically make it domesticize the application. Well, that's now way more common, but still you sometimes need to tell them federated identity. Ah, yeah, okay, right. So that's also. But I think what Davide says is make sure you have an app that's either really of importance, the impact HPC, or that has the masses. Like when we come to the use cases, I have two examples for Europe, which was one on student mobility and the other also on HPC, which basically really had some impact on. On getting new identity providers into the whole system, because, well, basically there was a clear carrot for the universities. But I'll talk about that more on the use cases. Otherwise, I'll give away all my sheets already.
Please keep asking questions, but also we can. Oh, please, Farhan.
In our case, in regards to the policy paperwork was the easiest part. The hardest part in the technical, not in setting up the core infrastructure, but at the university side.
Yeah.
So the problem is with the directory service. So, well, some of them well maintained, well prepared. Some of them system-wide, yes, but the attribute says A, the value says B.
Yeah.
Okay, so that is the challenge that we have. So, but nevertheless, we just proceed because sometimes the university need to understand, because it's not really it's not easy to explain identity federation. ADROM is very easy to explain. In fact, when I went to Indonesia, they said, if we want to conduct ADROM workshop, we don't have to find a sponsor because they will lining up. Okay. But identity federation, okay, we have to knock each door to get the sponsor to run the workshop. It's not easy. But I think if you start with HPC is good use case. Like in our case now, the killer apps is ADROM and also ADROM as a service and also library remote access. Since the OpenNet and EasyProxy increased their prices, so they went to us. So that's the thing. So yeah, the hardest challenge probably you will meet is the cleaning up the directory service.
So killer service we will be going to later.
Yeah,
So we
yeah.
will keep that. Otherwise, we will never
Yes,
be
yes.
finished. Yeah.
Let's go ahead. So another question. Oh, please go ahead, Ted.
So I've been working with the Philippines for a number of years on and off, because every time we talk to the Philippines, there's a different set of people we talk to. And I think that's one of the problems the Philippines have, is that none of the universities seem to want to work together. They're all very independent. And so you're just representing one university. Yeah, so I think one of your biggest challenges is to get all of the universities in the same room together and say, we want to do this as a collective or as a federation. And getting all the CIOs together and saying, we need to do this as a thing. There's not going to be one university running it. It's not going to be your federation. It's going to be the Philippines Federation. And I think you need to get over that hurdle first to sort of move forward. Getting your players involved and getting them excited to do it. Exactly.
That's what we did when we set up ADROM for the first time. I locked the door until you guys set up, only then you can go out.
One way of doing that is to find some universities that want to work together. In our case, it was 7 out of our 50 that wanted to work together. I was in one of those in the 2000s, and we really did that work together, and then we started to expand and build it, because the others saw that we did it right, we did it good, and there was an inherent trust because we are a small country, but it's still important that you don't need to have everyone on board day one. You can grab a good bunch of universities or university colleges or whatever type of organizations you had, and trying to get them to collaborate from the beginning, and then you add more and more and more organizations to that. So don't do a big bang. Do
we started with 10 universities out of our 40 who were very keen to do it. And then eventually, over a few years, the rest of them finally came on board. They saw everybody else was doing it, so they had to do it too. So it's that sort of puzzle you need to work through.
Yeah.
We're actually starting it in our university. So we're starting it small. One of our colleges, we use one identity federation, identity management system. So we're trying to tap other universities to do the same. We're trying to make it more simpler so they can just install it easily. So we're exploring the Docker and they're just plug and play. And we're also starting to create some trainings. So one of the trainings is actually EduRoam. But our EduRoam right now is quite not that big in the Philippines. We're trying to make it some noise again. We're starting with our university has many campuses. So we're starting it with those campuses before we can try reaching out to the government to further the EduRoam. But yeah. So far, ano ba ba? Yeah, so far that's where we're at.
Yeah.
We're really just starting to Yes. Yes, yes. Another
EduRoam
step.
is a very good start.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, because it's a simple federation technology.
Yes. And
It's
it's easy for them to appreciate it because it's very easy.
And they start talking to each other.
And they start talking to each other, right? Yes.
And I think really, I mean, EduRoam has a good value for everybody who's around already. I mean, it's a clear incentive that a trustworthy way on getting access to well, basically a single resource. I won't say a simple resource, a single resource, which doesn't require too much, and that works.
And there you have the killer service for federation, get EduRoam.
Yeah.
That is really a killer service because the EduRoam technology by itself, the old ways are getting harder and harder, but get EduRoam technology is much nicer, much easier. So there you have the federation use case and the killer service.
Yeah. No, if I can add, not to mention the fact that EduRoam by itself can be quite insecure without get EduRoam, because you can, you have basically to accept whatever certificate you get, or you need a distribution system that is too complex to manage.
Yeah, and the advantage now with get EduRoam is that you basically leverage what is built already in the federation and extend that to the EduRoam infrastructure. So that means that you have a benefit of getting your identity federation in place, because that pays out also to the get EduRoam and does the EduRoam way of working, and it also exactly it gets you, releases you from some security aspects together. You also have to do, well, at least one maintenance less on your IDP on your admin side, because you only have to maintain the federation and not the EduRoam one. Yeah.
Can I ask you, if you want to add something, please do. Then can I ask you to also answer this question, because this one is part of this conversation, and I'm not going to ask this with the microphone, but if you can answer Menti. So let's change this a bit. Either your local NRAN is supporting the Identity Federation, or your plan to build an Identity Federation might get support from the NRAN.
Yeah.
And of course, this is for you.
So we have the question for you. Yeah.
Yeah, I do have a quick question.
Yeah.
For me or for me? No,
None
do you
for
have,
me.
do you have other question or no?
None for me. But our local NREN doesn't have identity federation.
Yes, but
That's actually
could they
at least
support
our-
this idea? Do you think they could be engaged in supporting you, your university, to build the Identity Federation? This is the real question.
So the NRN doesn't need to do the federation by itself, but it may need to be able to reach out to the other universities to join the work that you do.
Actually, I think that's possible if we can if we can talk. I think we'll need to convince them.
I'm,
Or
for instance, in Australia, I mean, you're a separate entity. Uh, do you interact with ARNet? I mean, I'm just curious how that works. I mean, we're all people from. I mean, on the European side, most of basically all NRENs are part of the NREN anyway, or the university runs the NREN and the federation.
So we're a bit weird, we're just Aussies.
Of course.
Fair enough.
So ARNet runs Eduroam, and they've been doing so for many years. They also provide a number of federation services like File Sender that is part of our federation. But beyond that, there's pretty much no real support. We acknowledge them, we talk to them occasionally, but that's as far as it really goes. In the early days, they were very keen to take over and run the federation, but our members were not keen to have them run the federation. And that's more internal Australian politics more than anything. So we then continued on as our own separate federation.
It's interesting to exactly what you say. Like, yeah, they run Eduroam and like File Sender. That is, yeah, you get some crossovers there.
Yeah, we need to go further along now, I think, because we have some more parts. The bar.
Well,
So I guess the yes passively is more or less in that.
yeah, it's almost similar situation. So the REN basically they provide services like EduVPN. That is another killer apps in our country, EduVPN. But to access that service, they require to use Identity Federation. So basically, yes, they support in that sense, but passively. So they just leave us alone, doesn't disturb us.
Okay.
Yeah, they give me business. Yeah, yeah, of course.
Yeah, that's good.
Oh, what else? Yeah.
Okay, I guess we can continue. So, oh no, this is for later. So, let's talk a bit, let's try to think about what's beyond identity federation in one country. Let's try to talk about the global access to resources. And of course, here I'm wearing my EduGain hat. So what is EduGain? EduGain is a federation of federations, or if you want, an inter-federation service. And the problem EduGain is solving is that when you have this trust layer in one country with one identity federation, it's of course the entities can exchange metadata and let users of the home organization access resources, but if you want to access a resource that is published in another identity federation, then you would need to set up again bilateral agreement with a single resource, because basically they're not talking. Identity federations are not talking among themselves. And EduGain is solving that problem. It lets identity federations to exchange metadata, and this is just the technical part. The foundation is trust again. They trust each other because we have a set of common rules, which is thinner than what you usually have in one country, because it is difficult because we have, you know, a very diverse environment and countries and identity federation. So EduGain was born as a little pilot project with a few identity federations back in 2010, more or less, well, even before, but that was pre-production. Production happened between 2010 and 2011. And nowadays, it reached 78 federations in 76 countries around the world. almost 10,000 entities, and which almost 4,000 of them are service providers, and more than 6,000, as you can see, are home organizations, universities, research centers, and the likes. And as you can look at this, as you can see by this map, we have quite a good coverage, but still a lot of work to do in some area like Africa, like Latin America. Actually, we have quite a good coverage in the APAN region. But let's have a closer look to the APAN region. So these are all the identity federations that we have currently in this region of the world. And of course, we would be happy to have a few more, the Philippines, of course. And you can check also the status of the current membership in EduGain. And what we have found is that maybe we didn't say this before, but what we have found is that regional organizations are also very important. And APAN, of course, has created this venue at this meeting where we can discuss about this. Without APAN, we wouldn't have this, right? And the same is true for Europe and for GÉANT. Without GÉANT, probably the EduGain development wouldn't have been so successful. And we have many examples of this. Please, Terry.
So I was just talking yesterday to the CEO of Bangladesh's NREN, and they came to our first APAN training session, Federation Identity training session way back in Singapore. And he was actually in the meeting, and he sort of said to me then, we need to have one of these identity federations. It's taken a few years and a lot of pain on their side, but a lot of communications, a lot of work. And he was saying, congratulating me and Dahlia, that they now have an active, ongoing federation with members that are growing, members that are seeing the value in it. And their real killer app is access to publishers, a bit like what Farhana's saying. And they were really grateful for the effort that APAN and myself and my team have put into getting them up to speed. So they're really happy that they've actually taken that step, done the hard work, and now have a really good active federation. It was great to hear. He also mentions my name every time he goes to talk at a meeting and says, Terry helped us. And his
Wonder
team
why.
helped.
Wonder why. Yeah, I mean, regional support has proven to be very important. And
We see that in Africa too.
yeah, and we'll come to the in a few slides. But yeah, also Africa has been, has this recent development thanks to but mostly to regional national education network in Africa. But how EduGain is built and run? Well, first of all, EduGain is a community. It's really a community. It's run by, the governance of EduGain is completely run by the community, while the operations of EduGain are funded by GÉANT through the GÉANT project. And EduGain has, at the center of EduGain, there is the EduGain Assembly that is composed by all the EduGain members. They nominate a delegate and a deputy that will participate to the assembly. The assembly nominates an EduGain steering committee that is the one that is supposed to take some operational decisions, but also approve changes to the technology profiles. And the technology profiles are what the EduGain participants and identity providers and service providers that would like to be published into EduGain must implement. We also have, given the structure of EduGain, given that the operations are run by Géant and funded by Géant, Géant has also this role of executive committee that, to be honest, is has never been played but one time, when EU decided to cut all the funds to agreements and relationships and projects with Russia, with the invasion of Ukraine, and this is the only time that the Erdogan Executive Committee, the Géant side, step into the Erdogan governance. Okay. Oh, you can also look, if you want. This is a reference to all the documentation for the Erdogan community and governance.
As a short
Yeah,
short
please.
fun fact on the steering committee, so we have in total 7 members, and it's good to see that you're 4 out of 7 here. That's what I really want to appreciate to this. So
Yes. Yeah, it's really good. Yeah, and we're also very happy to have 2 of the members from this part of the world. That's really good. Yeah. Challenges of Erdogan. Well, all we have said is all about how successful is Erdogan because of the number of entities, the number of identity federations. But we face true challenges because the trust across borders, and this is about, you know, the access to global resources, is not easy. It's quite difficult, and it's difficult to have identity providers to release attributes. It's difficult for, you know, home organizations to trust the users' data into the international service providers' hands. And again, attribute sharing is difficult because also the semantic is many times it is changing among countries, and we also have different policies on privacy, security, and even about how you run the operations. For example, we have identity federations that are updating the metadata about the entities every day, every few days, every few hours. And Erdogan is trying to harmonize the whole thing. It's quite challenging. And this is why we developed a strategy and a roadmap to evolve Erdogan to be more useful. But before going into that, and I will leave the floor to Paul for that, we have again a few questions for you. This time is about, this is a free question, so either if you want to answer via Menti, do that. If we want just to open the floor, speak to the mic, that's even better. So what do you think Erdogan could do better? Sorry.
We will keep this question open until we start the next Menti question.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, because this is a hard one.
Maybe it will come to your mind. But if you have faced already a use case where you thought, this is really, well, in a challenge in access an international service, either because, I can name a few. For example, one of the things that actually is sometimes upsetting me is that it's not clear for services what are exactly the attributes they want to let users access. Because we don't have a standard, we don't have a policy for that is accepted by all the Erdogan participants. And it is difficult to agree on this. It has been always very difficult.
I think we'll let this was open and continue.
Yeah. Let's continue. Unless you have anything, you can interrupt us. And Paul, the floor is yours.
Yeah. So over the last year, Edigen Steering Committee has worked quite hard, very hard I will say, with 4 meetings during year with an extra, we had built a strategy. That's interesting. We did it in 1 year, even though we have few meetings. But this because the operations part is helping the steering committee to do the writing, do pre-work and so on and so on. So, yeah. So we did a mission statement. I will not read this, not at all, because this is on the website. Will be on the website. Right now, we are doing the formal consultation of this strategy, but we're seeing it will more or less be the same. Word changes and stuff like that, of course. So the mission statement is to be able to connect the federations so services in one country can be used by users in another country. That is the mission statement. What that means, yeah, that's another thing. That is more deep, much more deep. And we also have a vision statement. And that is that we really can be a global, well-working infrastructure for this. And this, we are not there, I can say. This is our part, and you start to talk about that in what we need, what we are seeing for, what really needs to see what a problem, especially for attribute release. So that's important. Continue. Yeah. So the goals are here, written down. I will not go through these. It's there. But what we are talking about, and we will talk a lot more about today, is the baseline. Baseline of the federation. Baseline of identity providers. Baseline of service providers. Baseline of Edigen. Built on top of that on federations. This is all about trust, as we said before. And building trust is very important. We need to build it even more. We need to enhance trust. And that is very much in strategic goals. But then we have things like how we will try to fund it in a better way, how we will do and enforce and update and make policies easier to read, better to understand, and just make it a little bit more sharp. Yeah, also, and then we will think, especially in the steering committee, how we will do the enforcement part, how we will take action against when we see compliance issues. Because we need to do that too. But we're not there yet. Continue. So, if you look at this break this down to some type of roadmap-y thingy, then you really need to figure out what type of changes do we need to do. And here we see that you have 2 columns. The blue one is when the federation supports the entities, and the orange one is who needs to do what. So one of the first things that we started with, was it last year?
Federation security contact?
Security contact?
Yes, before.
Yeah, 2 years ago, yeah. So before that, we didn't have security contact registered for federations. This was the first step. We are not finished that yet, but we are on our way. Yeah. And what this will be, if I guess, this is my personal guess, it will be mandatory. As federations need to have a security contact.
We are at 70%.
We are on our way, but somewhere we need to drive the line,
yeah.
Say, now you must have it. And then we need to figure out, this is the hard one, audit processes for current members. How Edigen asked me as a federation operator, do you fulfill what you have written? Do you do this correct? instead of just, oh, going through this in the membership process. We need to do it continuously, one way or another. And then we also need to harmonize how we handle metadata in a good way, because there is a big difference between federation and federation. The difference is good, but we need to have more commonalities than we have today. Then we have, Terry talked about Certify yesterday. And Certify is up on the table for, should we demand that for our entities or not? We don't know yet. It's up there for discussion. Privacy information, yeah. Friday night when I was in a hotel in Copenhagen airport, I read through 5 different applications to be members of Edugain. And they all had one thing in common around privacy. They all have privacy legislation in the countries that are written into the policies. Perfect. But we will see more and more privacy things. And then we have things like the assurance framework, we have attribute release and stuff like that. All of these we must work with. Next 20.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, this is a simple one. It's not as hard as the last one.
Yeah, this is a yes, no, or not an Edugain delegate or deputy
No.
yet question.
Yeah.
So it's quite easy to answer.
We want to add people, we want to have a more engagement. That's a thing.
So the plan when we have written these questions was to ask this question after what Edugain could do better. And the answer would have been, oh, you need to participate more to the assemblies.
One of the things, of course.
Yes. If the no was winning, but yeah.
So that's good. Let's continue.
Yeah, let's go ahead.
I will go there.
I'll do the singing then. Okay, so let me first. It's on. So I'm not sure if I introduced myself already, but so I'm Maarten Kremers. I work for SURF, which is the Research and Education Network in the Netherlands. I'm there involved in the Trust and Identity Department. We run our own federation, SURF Connect, which is a hub and spoke one, which is apparently still one of the odd ones, but I think it's still the best idea, to be honest. And people are agreeing with us nowadays. So Victoriano was agreeing last year, so he said in hindsight the hub and spoke is well right. I couldn't agree more with him, of course. Besides that, I'm also we just like SURF in our case is a membership organization. We have GEANT, which is the European membership organization for NRENs in Europe. And they are also partly paid by the money of their members, of all the NRENs, but also paid by the EC to develop services like network or, in our case, trust and identity work. I run what they call the work package in the GEANT project on trust and identity, and that amongst other conveys of running the whole Edugain infrastructure with Davide as formal as the task lead or service owner, but also, for instance, the global Eduroam infrastructure. It's a European top node, but that also conveys as the global top node for Europe, and we also convey from there the secretariat and the supporting tools and get input on, for instance, the Get Eduroam apps and stuff like that. So enough about me. Back to Edugain. So use cases. I think if we go to the next slide. Killer apps, what we clearly see is what we also discussed earlier on, is if it's either has many people or it's a high impact. In this case, we're talking about My Academic ID. My Academic ID is basically a proxy on top of leveraging Edugain, because sometimes Edugain can give out all kinds of different attributes, and to make it a little bit more easy solvable also on the backside for each services users. This is to support student mobility. And what we saw is that there is, again by the EC, the European Commission funded a program called Erasmus program, which is meant for the students in Europe to go abroad for half a year, to do a course or a minor in a university. That can be mostly in Europe. I think it's also possible to go really abroad to other, I'm not, and into Europe too. So one of the things that was until now still the case is that if you want to apply for such a grant by the EC and stuff like that and do the intercourse, you had to fill in lots of paperwork. So either paperwork or Excel sheets were transferred because University of Amsterdam wanted to put like 10 students into the University of Paris. Well, they basically emailed Excel sheets around and sometimes emailing and all kinds. And the EC said, well, we want to make it a more streamlined effort that you can do it in a digital way, applying via stuff. And without going in exactly all the details on how the stuff is going, one of the things is that users have basically end user services on applying for such a online learning agreement and getting info back and Erasmus app. And therefore basically the European Commission said, well, we want to have that, but you always have to log in via your federated identity and have to hand out a certain identifier. And when that was, I think, realized mostly during the COVID period, we saw still that even though it was COVID, so the amount of exchanges was, I think, an all-time low at that moment. You really saw that given that the EC basically mandated it because they have to do it in a digital way, you saw for several universities in several countries that oh, now this is mandatory, so, well, I would say call it a stick in this case. People will use it. Yeah, I mean, in the end, it was a stick. I mean, in the end, you want a carrot to use it or a stick, and the people have to perceive some way of urgency. Well, in this case, if you don't do it and you're large enough, then, well, you can't apply anymore for the grants of the scholarships. Well, that is a business incentive for a university to get also their identity management up and running. On the next slide, we see my Access ID, which is basically the brother or sister of my academic ID, which is being used for Euro HPC connectivity. Again, also a top-on layer of EduGain. And we see here that it's delivering basically a account-linking service, also getting higher vetted identities to the Euro HPC clusters, which are in Europe. Also to mention, so this is more on the high impact cases and less of possibly the masters. Also good to mention is that for my academic ID, if we could go back, well, one slide just to give you my academic ID. It's being used for the grants of the Erasmus course, but also what we see now is the European Commission is funding what we call European universities, and that are collaborations of 6-7 universities in Europe, each from 6-7 different countries, and they basically organize, for instance, a shared course. And hey, guess what? If you have a shared course, you have at a moment in time you have like not only students from your university, but guess what? Also from 6 other universities who want to enter either your course catalog or a shared course catalog or your Moodle. So also here we put in a role for my academic ID to be basically that proxy for all the services that are behind each and every, well, at least a couple of them, to get basically a proxy for shared services behind that several European universities. If we then go 2 slides forward. Also on the US side, we saw NIH deploying a new set of requirements. They wanted to have a higher level of assurance. Again, the NIH has some very nice resources, not only for the US, but for the whole world. People wanted to get into that. And the fact that they mandated that made sure that some of the IDPs, of course, did take in this requirement on having a more and higher valued login. Again, if there's a carrot or a stick and a sense of urgency, people tend to go walking. So walking in a positive way, not walking away, but walking towards the goal. Finally, we go to Africa. Here we have now what they call EduID Africa, which is a catch-all federation. So instead of every federation or every country building the technical capabilities of a federation, they have again a collaboration where they have a catch-all federation and they can use it basically as a hosted IDP, hosted federation solution. So like here, 15 federations. These were from yesterday. You said the stats. Yes. So 15 federations in it with a couple of identity providers, a couple of service providers. Not per se large in amount of IDPs and SPs, but it makes sure that also these institutions can use federated access in a collaborative way. And one of the things they support is Research for Life. For lower income countries with online access to academics and professional peer-reviewed content. Again, you see that also here with institutional access via a hosted federation, people can easily use some online resources while not having the hassle of providing local accounts and make sure is he still in, does he have to sign up, oh did he leave, he has to lose his access rights. No, all settled by the IDP and the federation and easy resource access. So, two examples from Europe, one from Americas and one from Africa on how international collaboration makes an impact and the use of the local federation and on top of that federation educating on getting things done. And with that we go to yet another Menti.
Yes, Menti time again.
Was it noticed? I think this was one. I had one up, wasn't it? That's one.
Sorry, yeah.
And if you don't run a federation, I would also interesting to learn otherwise what would you like to have here? I mean, what would it be for you? I mean, given that we also have some people, didn't think of that question.
Yeah, so the question now is what type of services are used in your federation or you plan to use more in your federation? And here are some examples. You may have other, but so we have academic journals, learning management systems, HPC, cloud resources for research. So we are talking about data sharing, we are talking about private clouds, and RAN IT services like File Sender, as Terry was talking about, Get at the Room, and collaborative tools, and we are talking about O365, Google Suite, or your flavor of
And
online.
you can put in more than one.
Yeah, you can put more than one.
This is an open one.
It's,
an open one.
yeah.
We didn't want to
You can vote 9, no more than 9.
More than 9, that's true.
I should do 5. I think 5 I did. Or 5,
you changed it.
Oh, did I 5? Oh, oops.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's a limit, I think.
Oh, yeah, well,
That's okay.
otherwise, but at
That's
least
okay.
Yeah, just to have
you have to choose.
a feeling of what are the most used resources. And the most used resources might not be, by the way, the famous killer app, because there are some resources like academic journals that were very important in the beginning of federations, and they have this high volume of logins, because if you think about, even with single sign-on, but if you think about the work of a researcher, they need to access academic journals every day. But if you want to do some computing, what you do, you access the platform that is giving you access to computing one time. You spin up a virtual machine and then you use SSH to access the virtual machine. So you're probably going to use federated access for the virtual machine after 6 months or 3 months, but that has an high impact. And this might be the case for HPC systems, for example.
There might also be a small system that's used by 20 to 100 researchers, but it's there to solve cancer. And it's a high value service, but a low usage service because there's not many people doing it.
Yeah.
But that's a very important service to have in your federation.
And normally it's very hard for the university to seize those services. They are really flying under radar, but they are extremely important for the whole world, mostly. You talk about cancer, we talk about astronomical thingies. One of those is, of course, the guys that got the Nobel Prize the other year with gravitational waves. That they use federation to do stuff.
Yeah. And this is also a hint when you show stats to your CEO or to the board or whoever that is funding you, don't show just numbers, but also highlight the important use cases.
Yeah, and sometimes people see it also as which is up to a point also true, because as a cost saving mechanism, because if you do it right, then each and everybody will have to do less work because it's partly centralized. But I think even more it's also to how to enable research. I mean, please look also at the benefits. The fact that a academic can easily access the resources or a collaboration without the need of having, and here comes the security aspect in, without having the need to have yet another separate login with a separate password, where you can't control as a university what it does, and when it's gone, is that still there? And you have all the basically the shadow bookkeeping for each and every account. No, if you have used the leverage already, what you have there in your own identity account, you can leverage to your federation and to the inter-federation edugain, and therefore you can enable research and enable education. I think that is also the business value of it. Yeah, that.
So I will say what I also always say in the case. I'm coming from the land of the Nobel Prize. So if I want to have something done, I just say, okay, do you want to hinder research to get a Nobel Prize? For us, that works. It really does. Because we are the land of Nobel Prize. Yeah. But that is really true. And what I said a couple of months ago or a year ago, when I started with this, before I started with it, I got a professor that had gotten a Nobel Prize, getting me into his office, talk about what he wanted to do about communities, and we solved that 15 years later with the federations. So yeah, there is a high impact.
Yeah.
Thanks. I think we are almost there. So I don't know if you want to, if you have any questions, please, again, raise your hand. But before going through the really last 2 slides of this presentation, we need to ask a question that we skipped. And this is quite an important one. When Paul was talking about the education strategy and roadmap, he mentioned the fact that basically what we want to do and we think we need to do, and we agreed on that, is to raise the bar to be more effective. But how much can you raise the bar? Because there is a balance among inclusivity, trustworthiness, privacy, and attribute release policies that you can apply. For now, we think the balance is a lot on inclusivity in edugain, because we have a thin policy layer, and we want to expand this policy layer because we want to raise the bar, we want to raise the number of requirements. But if you raise it too much, then we might end up with some problem, because we don't want to leave. Well, I can't say we don't want to leave no one behind. Of course, I don't want to leave no one behind, but if you can't reach, a certain point right now, maybe you can in 1 year.
Yeah, just to add on the inclusivity. I mean, we started, of course, with good reasons that everybody has his own reasons for federations and his own policies and those special. So fine, also to get momentum, and we are very successful at it. But exactly, given that you at a moment in time want to raise the bar also for security reasons, which we see all around now, you want to have a better sense of trust, and here we go. Exactly, if we would raise the bar too quick, we might lose too many people, which I don't want. We don't neither. If we don't raise the bar, we go too slow, then we might basically fade away, because, well, the level of trust is also eroding. So it's fair balance between getting up to speed and increasing the trust while keeping the mass together.
So you can give up to 100 points each, so you can just balance them around. So that's
The sum is 100.
the sum for everyone is 100. Yeah. So you can put 15 on one and 20 on another, and so on.
Well, we have 8 already, so
Yeah.
funny. This is interesting. I reckon
It's really interesting.
this is an interesting one. I need to take it. This is really interesting. I didn't expect that, to be honest.
Very
Neither
good.
do I. This is very interesting.
Yeah, this is really interesting.
We need to do this in other venues too.
Yeah.
Really, really.
This I'd like to do in the next.
Assembly meeting.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Maybe we rethink, but this is.
Thanks a lot. I mean, the results are talking by themselves. On top of everything is trustworthiness, attribute release, and privacy. And inclusivity is something that yeah, can't say it's less important. It's important, but of course, it should not diminish the privacy, the easiness of the attribute release, and the trustworthiness of the infrastructure. This is quite clear. Thanks, everyone. I think we can just go with the last 2 slides, which is a call to action for identity federation. Yeah, we've just talked about improving, raising the bar, which means that we want to improve the baseline for security, data protection, and assurance. Of course, we want to do this together. Again, this is the community part. So this is not something that Edugain can't do this alone. To apply this layer of new requirements on top of the Edugain participants, we need the Edugain participant to do their part. And for this, our call to action is to look into the Identity Federation baseline expectation document that has been written by RefEds, now is 4 years, because yeah, it was 2021. And still, it's still really, I have to say, up to date with what we need right now. And it has different things for identity providers, operators, service provider operators, federation, and inter-federation operators. There are something in common is working contacts and incident response, vulnerability management, and a lot of stuff. But I think that, yeah, I'm not going to, read into this. You have the, this is just to give you a concise picture. But the point is that the baseline expectation has been written in a very abstract way, because that they don't have immediately actionable goals, and this is why you need to make an effort to convert these principles into something concrete, like, for example, vulnerability management and incident response has a RefEds framework for that. Is called certify, implement, certify. But make it a requirement, for example, to join Edugain. This is something that, for example, AAF has been doing for years, and it is a really nice policy because it has both inclusivity. You're not letting anyone be behind because you let them in the federation, but you're not letting them into Edugain if they do not support or certify. I think this is a great example on how to apply the policy, being strict at one hand, but also inclusive on the other one. Again, you have the link here, and I think we have the last question on Menti, if we still have 1 minute, which is, yeah, Yeah, it's a difficult one because so we didn't spend a lot of time on this, but
It's more about the willingness and how you want us to be able to go further and how fast. We want to help with that.
yeah, so basically what we are talking about here is and asking this question, how many years? So what is the frame, the time frame in which you think you can apply a change to raise, you know, raise the bar and improve the baseline of requirements in terms of identity assurance, privacy and security for the entities in your federation. Of course, the baseline is just, you know, an example of this.
So we're already ahead of the game because we already started a year ago with
Yeah.
this stuff. So we've
Yeah.
been out promoting it. So we do roadshows. We go and talk these sort of talks to each of our customers, and this is one of the topics we talk about. And we actually have a thing saying, well, because you do the federation rules and this, you've already done this one. Because you're doing certify, you've done
Yeah.
that one.
Yeah.
Because your contacts are up to date, 3 out of 5
Yeah.
already done.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, what Terry is saying is really important. You may find out, I'm sure you will find out that many of the things that are expected in the baseline are already being done by a lot of organizations. If we talk about identity assurance, I'm quite sure that most of the employees of the universities has been vetted with either an identity document of some kind or another good proof of identity that is compatible with the level of assurance that we have in the REFEDS assurance framework. And the same goes for certify. Probably you already have some kind of policy that might be improved a little bit and being written. This is another thing. And the other thing is also to have some kind of yearly, you know, checking process, for example.
And I also think that in the future we need some type of statements from the federation operators on the status.
Yeah.
What that means, we don't know, but some type of statement. I can say that from our federation, I will be happy to write a specific set of paper based on a template that says we fulfill this, and not that. I'm totally happy to do that.
we've got that sort of template for our compliance.
So we've been quite conservative because, I mean, we asked in a time range that was between 0 and 5 years, and most of the answers are within this 2 years time frame. But for IDPs, and I'm not surprised by this because usually IDPs, you know, you are more in control of IDPs because they're members usually of the federation. But everything is among this 2 years time frame, which is, by the way, what we were thinking about for many things. It's quite good.
Some of us actually run the IDPs as federation operators.
Yeah, yeah. Absolutely. Or they do run an IDP hosting service. Yeah. Like we do, for example. You do. Farhan is doing, running an IDP hosting service. Of course, if you run an IDP hosting service, if you are an hub and spoke federation, you have, more leverage in doing this job. Okay, so I have to really thank you for the nice participation, and we hope to continue the discussion instead of starting the discussion. And we are almost 10 minutes over.
It's only 20 minutes to the food.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. Really. Many applause to you. Yeah.